Before we get started on the talk, if you please join me in invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, class. Welcome back. Well, not the kids, obviously, but your teacher, welcome back. Typically on Sunday services, we have a normal kind of Dharma talk. But I'm deviating from that just a bit this time. Typically when we have class visits, we do a temple tour of a sort. And so we're still going to do that a little bit. And then, of course, do our normal chanting. So we have a 2-in-1 deal. But just like in our temple tours, typically give some background information on the temple and the life and history of the Buddha and his enlightenment. And then we'll kind of move on to, if we have time today at least, we'll move on to some of the iconography that we see in the temple, kind of go over some symbolism and the statues and whatnot. But I'm going to allow Quang here to start the discussion of the history and kind of the Buddhism 101 stuff. And we have time, then we'll move on to statues and then do some chanting as well. So I'll go ahead and let Quang take over. Thank you.
Yeah, so I'll give you a brief history on the history of Buddhism. I'll start with who the Buddha was before he became enlightened. I'll go into a little bit after what happened after he became enlightened. So the origins of Buddhism go back about 2,500 years in around modern-day Nepal. And the Buddha, before he became the Buddha, his name was Prince Siddhartha Gautama. He was the son of a very wealthy king, the Shakyamuni clan. And the day that he was born, a wise sage came up to him and he told his father, he said, "Your son will either grow up to be one of two things. He will grow up to be a great ruler, or he'll become a great sage, so like a great religious leader." And his father really didn't want him to become that religious leader. He really wanted him to take over the kingdom and pretty much just take over that job. So he did everything in his power to keep Prince Siddhartha out of the world and just inside the kingdom. Because he feared if he got outside the kingdom, he would see nasty things outside. He would see a bunch of suffering in the world. So he tried to make his son's life as easy and as sorry about that. So he wanted to make his son's life as easy as he could, to where there was no struggle, there was no hardship, it was just bliss all the time. And it's where eventually, as Prince Siddhartha grew up, he became very interested in what was happening outside of his kingdom. And finally, when he reached the age of 29, he had one of his attendants secretly take him outside of the kingdom, just to go on a quick stroll, just to go about and see what it was like outside the palace walls. And while he was out there, he had noticed what's called the 4 great sights. So the first sight that he saw was an old man walking down the street. You could see he was walking with a cane, and he was very close to death. And he had asked his attendant, he said, "What is this?" He's like, "Well, this is an old man." And he had never witnessed this out inside of his palace. He'd only ever seen healthy, beautiful young people. He had never seen anyone of old age. And the second sight that he saw was a sickly man. This was someone who was really at death's door. You could call him a leper. You could see him, his skin was in boils, and he was very sick. And he asked his attendant again, he's like, "Well, what is this?" It's like, "Oh, this is a sick man. This is what happens This is the next stage of life. You get old and you get sick. And then the third sight that you'd see it outside of the kingdom was a corpse. He had saw a dead man on the ground. And he asked his attendant again, well, what is this? He's like, well, this is a dead man. You get old, you get sick, and then you die. And then finally, the fourth sight that he had saw was a sage at that time, and he was sitting there meditating. And he goes, well, what is this fourth man here? What is he doing? And his attendant had told him, well, he's looking for a way out of the cycle of suffering. Which we call in Buddhism samsara. It's this endless cycle of death and rebirth, death and rebirth. Where you could take that to be physical death and rebirth, as in when you die in this life, you get reborn in another life. Or you can take it as more metaphorical, as in you live and you die many times a day. To where you could think that every breath you take is a birth and every exhale you take is a death. To where you can take either one of those. But then when he saw these four sights, it really shook him to the core. And he had noticed that living inside the palace, he was living in this illusion. He was realizing that the true world was out there outside the palace walls, and he wanted to figure out a way to end this suffering. He had saw the suffering of old age, sickness, and death, and he made a vow to set out to figure out a way to end that suffering. So finally, he had made the decision at 29 to leave the palace walls. He had his attendant secretly take him out of the kingdom one night, and he renounced the palace life. He renounced his heirship to the kingdom. And he cut off his hair, and he gave away all of his jewelry to his attendant. He gave it back to the palace. And thus he set off as an ascetic. So in his palace life, he was living this constant luxury. He had everything that he could ever want. So that was one extreme of life. And now he was going to that opposite extreme, to where extreme asceticism, to where he wasn't eating, he wasn't sleeping. All he was doing was trying to figure out a way to end the suffering. And then along the road, he had met two teachers. And these were great yogas at the time. And they taught him about meditation. And he had learned from his teachers how to get up in what's called the jhanas. So as you go deep into meditation, you'll enter these higher levels of consciousness, and there's said to be 8 of them that go all the way from the form realm of where we live to the 8th one being the formless realm, to where it's kind of outside material existence. But he found great bliss in these meditation states, but he realized as soon as he would come out of those states, he would just return to his normal life of suffering. So when he was in the states, he didn't experience that suffering, but it didn't last. And that also shook him to the core too. He said, well, if I can't find bliss in having everything, and I can't find bliss in asceticism, well, what is the way there? And he spent 6 years being this ascetic, trying to meditate on ways to end the cycle of suffering and to escape this cycle of samsara. And finally, on that 6th year of his ascetic journey, when he was 35, he had an epiphany, is that I won't find what I'm looking for in giving everything else away. And thus it came to the idea of the middle way, which is not extreme asceticism, giving up everything, and not extreme luxury, which is having everything. There's a happy medium between that, which is called the middle way. And he had that realization as he looked upon his life. He saw what was good and what was bad. And he came across this memory he had when he was a kid, when he was at a festival, and he just entered that first state of meditation when he was a kid, and upon recalling that, that's where he came up with the idea of the middle way. And so he came up with, well, he finally set forth that vow of, I will sit in meditation until I figure out a way to end the suffering. So in the iconography of Buddhism, there's what's called the Bodhi tree. We have a few of them outside the temple that you can go check out. And He sat underneath that Bodhi tree and he vowed, I will not sit up from this tree until I figure out a way to end the cycle of suffering. And so he sat there for 7 days, and on that 7th day, it finally hit him to where he realized where this was coming from, where the source of the suffering was originating. And he became what was called enlightened. He became the Buddha, which Buddha translates to in English, the awakened one. He finally awakened to the reality of what life was, the reality of what suffering is, where suffering comes from, and how to get out of that suffering. And so after his 7th day of meditation, he emerged out of the forest and he went back to some previous sages that he had met on his ascetic journey. And this is where he gave his first Dharma talk, which is called Setting in Motion the Wheel of Dharma. And that's where he gave his first sermon on the Four Noble Truths. And the Four Noble Truths is pretty much the whole foundation of Buddhism. And it takes many years, even your whole life, to realize just one of these noble truths. So where the first noble truth that he had told his ascetic friends was, the first noble truth of suffering is that in life there is suffering. Every breath you take is suffering. Every experience you have is suffering. Even though you may have everything, there's an underlying sense of dissatisfaction. To where the Sanskrit word for suffering is dukkha. And it's seen as suffering in the West, in English, but it more translates to a dissatisfaction. So where suffering sounds a little extreme, but dissatisfaction means that no matter what you do in life, there's always some inherent nagging of like, oh, this isn't the way that it could be. This isn't the way that I really want it. And the way that I see that is that you could be having the best time of your life, but then there may come the time where you go, I have to let this go. And as you see that you have to let that go, that brings you that dissatisfaction. It's like, why can't this last forever? Now, the second noble truth is the cause of that suffering, the cause of that dissatisfaction is desire. More further down to the noble truths, you get to the third one, to where the first two are grasping, my desire is causing all this suffering. But then the third noble truth goes into, there is a way out of this suffering. And this one comes in the form of, as you start to contemplate your desires, you realize that there is a way to pacify those desires. There is a way to end that grasping. There is a way to end the dissatisfaction. There's a way to flow with life and just let life happen. To where not trying to force things, not trying to put things the way you want them to be, but just letting the natural flow of life happen to you. To where this can be called seeing things as they are. You don't see the projections, your own projections on life, but you just see things as they happen. You see interactions from people just as they are. You don't hold ideas about them. You don't put your own expectations on them. You just let them happen to you. So where now, this is easier said than done, but then now you get to the fourth noble truth, and this is the path. The fourth noble truth is the Eightfold Path. This is the way out of that suffering. This is the way to deal with the grasping and the desires in your life. And then that Eightfold Path revolves around morality, it revolves around conduct, and it revolves around meditation. To where you go into your ethical conduct, how do you treat people? How do you speak to people? How do you think about people? To where the Noble Eightfold Path is about developing a reflective mind, to see that it's not all about me, it's not all about my desires, but looking out into the world and seeing that if I want to be happy, if I want to be content with life, I'm sure everyone else wants the same thing as well. So through that morality, through that concentration, through those actions towards. So after he gave that first sermon, he was 35, and the Buddha had went along for 45 years until his death at 80 years old. So that whole time he spent teaching, he spent sharing the Dharma with people and how to live a more fulfilling life, how to not grasp things that cause you suffering, and to just live life as it happens to you. Oh, yes.
Any questions for him? So we're online. Okay. Thank you for that intro, Quang. So that's your Buddhism 101 lesson right there. Short and sweet. So we do have a little bit of time before we can go to chanting. So I just wanted to also introduce some of the stuff that you see in the temple, that you'll see in many Buddhist temples, depending on the tradition. So for our temple, our tradition falls under the Mahayana umbrella. So there are two main traditions in Buddhism. There's the Theravada, which is kind of like the orthodox version of Buddhism, which is mostly practiced in countries like Thailand, Sri Lanka, Cambodia, some parts of Vietnam, and some other East Asian countries. But Mahayana or Theravada means the way of the elders, whereas Mahayana, Maha means great, and Yana means vehicle, so it's a great vehicle. And what distinguishes the two is that in Theravada, the orthodox version, that their main objective is for just the monastics to attain enlightenment. So every monk and nun, their ultimate goal is to attain enlightenment for themselves and to get out of the cyclic existence of life, of birth and death. And that their highest achievement is to become an arhat, which is a fully enlightened person, but not a Buddha. Whereas in Mahayana, it's a little bit more expansive. It follows the ideal of the Bodhisattva, where Bodhisattva is something like a saint-like being. And their objective is to attain enlightenment not just for themselves, but for others as well. And it's also in that belief that anybody and everybody can become a Buddha. So Buddhahood in the Mahayana tradition is very much possible. It's very difficult. There hasn't been a Buddha since historical Buddha, but it serves that possibility. And so most, I don't want to say most, but a big chunk of Buddhist temples, at least in the States, do fall under the Mahayana tradition in some way, shape, or form. So anyway, when we do step into a Mahayana temple, you'll see a lot. Well, right now we're all fully decorated because we just had the Lunar New Year, so it's not usually this festive, but nonetheless, we have, of course, our historical Buddha, Shakyamuni, or Gautama, Siddhartha Gautama, before he was the Buddha. As you always see him front and center for the most part. To his right, we have the saint Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva. Avalokiteshvara is a Sanskrit name, which literally translates to one who hears the cries of the world. And to the left over there, on the other corner, we have Kshitigarbha Bodhisattva, or Earth Store Bodhisattva. And on the two back corners, we have two Deva guardian Bodhisattvas. So they're kind of guardians of the temple, guardians of the Dharma. And you'll see one that looks fairly pleasant and inviting and welcoming. So he's the guardian that will welcome in people with good intentions and that want to learn and want to practice. On the other corner, we have his opposite. So as you can tell, he's very menacing looking. And so he does just that, where he protects the temple, protects the Dharma from those with ill intentions. So those are the statues. We have, of course, in the center here, we have Amitabha Buddha with his two attendants. Avalokiteshvara, which is also the one in the corner, is one of his attendants. To his left and to his right, we have Mahasamaprapta, which is great strength Bodhisattva. So those are the Amitabha Buddha's two attendants. And the reason we have them here is because our tradition is Tian Tai. Tian Tai tradition is a mixture of Zen and another tradition called Pure Land. Of course, we've all heard Zen before, right? But Zen is very meditation intensive. So it's a lot of meditation, very little chanting, whereas the Pure Land tradition is a lot of chanting and little meditation. And so our tradition of Tian Tai combines both aspects, and so we have kind of an equal part of chanting and meditation. Mostly because we consider chanting as a form of meditation as well. And so we have Amitabha, or we mention Amitabha quite a bit out of honor to the Pure Land tradition. Questions on the statues?
In past events you mentioned, trying to get some clarity on it, do they represent like real metaphysical beings, or are these like virtues that are being personified? How should the students think of that?
So there are some historical figures when it comes to bodhisattvas. But unfortunately for us, the bodhisattvas are here, are what we would consider celestial beings. But more or less, they represent characteristics they represent specific characteristics. So Avalokiteshvara Bodhisattva, for instance, represents great compassion. And so when we invoke the name of Avalokiteshvara, or we mention them, or recite or chant their sutra, whatnot, or visualize them in meditation, we're trying to invoke and develop those characteristics of loving kindness and loving compassion within ourselves. So they're symbolic in that respect, right? Same thing with the Buddha, right? If we see a Buddha, if we look at the Buddha, right, he's very serene, he's very calm, he's very at peace. And so those are the characteristics that we also want to develop in our life, is to be serene, to be at peace, to have peace of mind and freedom. And so they're not here necessarily to be worshipped, right? Because if you tap on the statues, they're mostly hollow, right? They're plastic, they're cement, they're bronze. They're not here. They don't care for your worship. So they're not here for us to worship, but they're here for us to develop the characteristics that they have, that they represent, and so that we can live through them almost in a way. And so even though we do bow, right, we're bowing out of respect to their teachings, but we're also bowing to our own inherent Buddha nature, right? That we all have the capacity, the capability to become enlightened. And so we're kind of being humble to ourselves and also respecting others that will also eventually become enlightened as well. And so we're kind of giving an advance salutation to a future Buddha, right? But it's not, again, it's not a means of worship. It's a means of respect and gratitude for those teachings. Good question. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
You mentioned the Theravada tradition and the monks that are just trying to be enlightened. Does that mean they don't really have services like a Mahayana? Is it kind of a closed community?
Some are. Some are. So there are specific Theravada traditions that are, like I said, very orthodox, right? So they stick very much directly to the rules, and they follow the rules to the T, which also includes them being in seclusion, right? And so a lot of like forest monasteries in the forest, right? So they're inaccessible to the majority, to the major public. And so they're practicing for themselves. That's their main objective. But at least in the West, all the Theravada traditions have services, right? But yeah, it's common for both sides, for both means. Yes, I do have services. I do do stuff for the community, But then you also have the other side of that where they just want to be alone, right? And they support themselves in that sense. But almost all at least Western temples adhere to the Western way of having services. Yes, sir.
So where does the Zen Buddhism fall?
Zen?
Yeah.
What about it?
Where does it fall? Like Theravada or?
Oh, Zen is Theravada. Mahayana. Zen is Mahayana, yes. Yes, ma'am.
What about Vajrayana?
Vajrayana?
Another major sect?
Yes and no. We'll see sometimes a Vajrayana, which is Tibetan Buddhism. Sometimes we would see it fall under as a third category. So there's Theravada, Mahayana, and Vajrayana. But realistically, they do fall under the Mahayana umbrella. But because the reason why they're considered a third category is because they're very esoteric and very heavily influenced by their folk religions. But they include the worship of deities and these other rituals and all these different ceremonies that they do. That's not inherently Buddhist necessarily. And of course, they have the whole lineage of reincarnation of the lamas and the Rinpoches and all these other things. And so for those reasons and for other reasons, this is why we kind of separate them into a third category. But fundamentally, they are Mahayanist. Good question. Any other questions? Sorry, the wind is like flapping, and it's like taking away all our stuff outside and making noises. Cool. Well, if there are no other questions, then we will transfer the merits and we will do our chanting. Please join me invoking the Buddha's name 3 times. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. For any positive karmic action we've accumulated here today, we wish to transfer the merit to all sentient beings and wish them full enlightenment. Feel free to grab a book if you'd like to follow along or sit. Please go to page 187. Peace, speech, and mind in perfect oneness, I send my heart along with the sound of the bell. May the hearers awaken from forgetfulness and transcend all anxiety and sorrow. Listen, listen, this wonderful sound brings me back to my true gratitude we offer this incense to all Buddhas and Bodhisattvas throughout space and time. May it be fragrant as earth herself, reflecting our careful efforts, our wholehearted mindfulness, and the fruit of understanding slowly ripening. May we and all beings be companions of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. May we awaken from forgetfulness and realize our true home. Incense in the censer now is burning, all the Dhamma realm in every place, auspicious clouds appearing, our sincere intention thus fulfilling, as all Buddhas now show their perfect body. Homage to the incense spout canopy, Bodhisattvas and great Bodhisattvas. Homage to the eternally abiding Buddhas, the supreme Dhamma, and sagely Sangha throughout the Dharma realm and the realm of empty space and 3 periods of time. Homage to the fundamental teacher Shakyamuni Buddha, Maitreya, honored future Buddha, Manjushri, great wisdom, Bodhisattva, restored great vow, Bodhisattva, all Dharma guarding Deva Bodhisattvas and the glorious mountain assembly of Buddhas and Bodhisattvas. To Amitabha Buddha in the land of ultimate bliss, Avalokiteshvara, great compassion, Bodhisattva, great strength, Bodhisattva, restored great vow, Bodhisattva, and the assembly of great pure sea-like Bodhisattvas.
Ratnatrayaya Namo Avalokiteshvaraya Bodhisattvaya Mahasattvaya Mahakarunikaya Om Sarvarajaya Sodanadasya Namostitvayi Mamaya Parokiteshvararambhava Namo Narakindi Mahavaswami Sarvadhatu Shubham Ajiyam Sarvasattva Namo Vastava Namo Bhagamavitatu Tadyata Om Avalokitokate Kate Hiri Mahabodhisattva Sarvasattva Mara Mara Mahi Mahi Hridayam Guru Guru Karmam Doro Doro Vishati Mahavishati Dara Dara Vivinishvaraya Chara Chara Mama Vimala Muktirehi Ehi Shina Shina Arsham Prashari Vishwa Vishwam Prashaya Horo Horo Mara Horo Horo Hi Sara Sara Siri Siri Soro Soro Bodhiya Bodhiya Bodhaya Bodhaya Maitreya Narakindi Krishanina Vayamana Swaha Siddhaya Swaha Mahasiddhaya Swaha Siddha Yogeshwaraya Swaha Narakindi Swaha Mara Nara Swaha Siddha Simhamokaya Swaha Sarva Mahasiddhaya Swaha Chakra Siddhaya Swaha Padmakasaya Swaha Narakindi Bhagaraya Swaha Bhavadi Sankaraya Swaha Namo Ratnatrayaya Namo Aya Parokiteshvaraya Swaha Om Sriyanto Mantrapadaya Swaha. Body is bringing morning light and concentration. My heart is at peace. A half smile is born on my lips. This is a new day, and I vow to go through it in mindfulness. The sun of wisdom has risen, shining in every direction. Global Sangha diligent. Bring your mind into meditation. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Namo Shakyamunaye Buddhaya. Unsurpassed, profound, and wonderful Dharma is difficult to encounter in hundreds of millions of eons. I now see and hear it, receive and uphold it, and I vow to fathom the Tathagata's true meaning. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. Namo Shakyamuni Buddha. I have heard respects to the Buddha, the Deva has to make questions, saying in verse, many gods and men are eager to know what are the greatest blessings which bring about a peaceful and happy life. Please, Tathagata, will you teach us? The Buddha replied, not to be associated with the foolish ones who live in the company of wise people, honoring those who are worth honoring. This is the greatest happiness, to live in a good environment, to have planted good seeds and to realize that you are on the right path. This is the greatest happiness, to have a chance to learn and grow, to be skillful in your profession or craft, practicing the precepts and loving speech. This is the greatest happiness, to be able to serve and support your parents, to cherish your own family, to have a vocation that brings you joy. This is the greatest happiness, to live honest, generous and giving, to offer support to relatives and friends, living a life of blameless conduct. This is the greatest happiness, to avoid unwholesome actions, not caught by alcoholism or drugs, and to be diligent in doing good things. This is the greatest happiness, to be humble and polite in manner, to be grateful and content with a simple life, not missing the occasion to learn the Dharma. This is the greatest happiness, to preserve and be open to change, to have regular contact with monks and nuns, and to fully participate in Dharma discussions. This is the greatest happiness, to live diligently and attentively, to perceive the noble truths and to realize nirvana. This is the greatest happiness, to live in the world with your heart undisturbed by the with all sorrows and dwelling in peace. This is the greatest happiness, for he or she who accomplishes unvanquished wherever they go. Always they are safe and happy. Happiness lives within oneself. Namo thus come one worthy of offering a proper and universal knowledge, perfect in understanding and conduct, skillful in leaving the world through liberation, perfect and complete understanding of all worldly dharma, unsurpassed, night taming hero, teacher of gods and people, Buddha, the world honored one. Bodhisattva Avalokita, while moving in the discourse of Prajna Paramita, shed light on the five skandhas and found them equally empty. After this penetration, he overcame ill-being. Listen, Shariputra, form is emptiness, emptiness is form, form is not other than emptiness, emptiness is not other than form. The same is true with feelings, perceptions, mental formations, and consciousness. Listen, Shariputra, all dharmas are marked with emptiness. They are neither produced nor destroyed, neither defiled nor immaculate, neither increasing nor decreasing. Therefore, in emptiness there is neither form nor feelings, nor perceptions, nor mental formations, or consciousness, no eye or ear or nose or tongue or body or mind, no form, no sound, no smell, no taste, no touch, no object of mind, no realms of elements, no interdependent origins, and no extinction of them, no ill-being, no cause of ill-being, no end of ill-being, and no path, no understanding, no attainment. Because there is no attainment, the Bodhisattvas grounded in pride present, the past, present, and future arrive at Anuttara Samyak Sambodhi. Therefore one should know that perfect understanding is the highest mantra, the unequal mantra, the destroyer of ill being, the incorruptible truth, the mantra, Prajnaparamita, should therefore be proclaimed. Gate, gate, para, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha, gate, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha, gate, gate, para, samgate, bodhi, swaha. Om mani padme hum, 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 om mani padme hum. May all beings without limit, without end, have a share in the merit just now made, in whatever other merits I have made. Those who are dear and kind to me, beginning with my mother and father, whom I have seen or never seen, and others neutral or hostile beings established in the cosmos, the three realms, the four modes of birth, with 5, 1, or 4 aggregates wandering on from realm to realm. If they know of my dedication of merit, may they themselves rejoice, and if they do not know, may the devas inform them by reason of their rejoicing in my gift of merit. May all beings always live happily, free from animosity. May they attain nirvana and their radiant hopes be fulfilled. Take refuge in the Buddha, the one who shows me the way in this life. I take refuge in the Dharma, the way of understanding and of love. I take refuge in the Sangha, the community that lives in harmony and awareness. In the refuge of Buddha, I clearly see the path of light and beauty in the world. Dwelling in the refuge of Dharma, I learn to open many doors on the path of transformation. Dwelling in the refuge of Sangha, shining light that supports me, keeping my practice free of obstruction. Taking refuge in the Buddha, in myself I aspire to help all people recognize their own awakened nature, realizing the mind of love, taking the Dharma and myself, I aspire to help all people fully master the ways of practice and walk together on the path of liberation, taking refuge in the Sangha and myself. I aspire to help all people build fourfold communities, to embrace all beings and support their transformation. Citing the sutras, practicing the way of awareness gives rise to